we have another final to look forward to, Matt, this Sunday afternoon in Pairc Ui Chaoimh, National Hurling League final. And I think it was probably Dan and Tom Morrissey that summed it up best, that how important it is to win a National League title. They said it after the third round in Galway, and there's many people without a league medal, as they reference, and they've only two, and they want to win as many as they can. And no better team to meet in a final than Kilkenny, and a rematch of last year's All-Ireland final.
Yeah, sure. It's fantastic, and it's turning back the clock, I suppose, to another era in the 30s when Limerick and Kilkenny absolutely dominated the hurling landscape, and it's going to be a very interesting final, Jack. And as we spoke there with Joe Quaid, and the narrative that's going around, that that Limerick are firm favourites and they've just got to turn up and win and all that sort of thing. I think that is very dangerous. It's disrespectful to Kilkenny, first of all, but of course, a lot that's feeding into it, as I said earlier, is that Mikey Carey and Conor Brown from last year's team are not around. Adrian Mullen and TJ Reid have not featured in the league. But still in all, Kilkenny are in the league final, Jack. And they have a similar record in many to Limerick, in that they've just lost once in the league. They lost to Tipperary. And, in the semi-final, Kilkenny faced a Cork team who were unbeaten in 2023. And I know that Cork were reduced to 14 players with the sending off of Owen Downey and all this sort of thing. But, that to me was a very significant landmark victory in 2023 for Kilkenny. And certainly a landmark victory for their new manager, Derek Lyng, who's in his first year in charge after taking over from Brian Cody, and sort of sometimes when you take over from a legend, it's a bit of a poison chalice. If you just look at the English League and Manchester United after Matt Busby, Liverpool after Bill Shankly, that type of thing. You're talking about it. United after Alex Ferguson. That's it's very, very hard to fill those boots. But I think Derek Lyng to date has done a very, very good job in bringing his team to the final, and they will be primed up. And they've introduced a number of new players during the campaign, and he's made a very significant change around in defence, and a very, very big call in nominating Hugh Lawler at centre back, who was outstanding at full back last year, and has put Tommy Welsh in at full back. He's made some big calls. He hasn't been afraid to make the big calls, and I think this is going to be a really, really big test for Limerick. But you'd have to say, if Limerick produced anything like they produced in the second half against Tipperary, that they will be very, very hard to beat. But in the context of the league and in the context of the forthcoming championship, it is hugely important, I suppose, from a Kilkenny point of view, to put down a marker. That because there's an air of invulnerability about Limerick at the moment, and somebody has got to put down a marker and lay a glove on them and say, look, they are vulnerable after all.
Yeah, and I think Kilkenny could be the team to do that. You mentioned the Ballyhale boys. I think we could see them back. I think it's an interesting one there with Hugh Lawler at 6. He did so well on Aaron Gillane. The temptation is surely there from Derek Lyng, if Richie Reid is fit, to just put Richie back in at 6 and put Hugh back in on Aaron Gillane as did in the final. But one thing they'll have this year to deal with that they didn't last year is a certain Cian Lynch, and it'll be very interesting to see how they approach that, because the Cian Lynch that they met in 2019 is a completely different player. He's in a different position. He's obviously got better in the last few years. So it's a conundrum that no one has seemed to crack yet. And, Kilkenny are the latest that will, try and have to make a plan for him.
Yeah, you see that, if you like, the teams are going in opposite directions. Where when you're comparing them with last year's All-Ireland final, we're talking about the 4 key players that Kilkenny haven't had in the league. Limerick, by contrast, have Cian Lynch back in the squad. Plus, they have Pairc Casey right from the start. Now he played a part in last year's All Ireland final, but you Pairc Casey, who's got a lot of hurling under his belt, and let's say we've the real Pairc Casey back again. So that's a huge plus, and I can understand all that, and why people would be thinking that it sort of is Limerick's to lose, but Joe Quaid mentioned it there, Jack, about the great tradition of Kilkenny, and you don't have them beaten up. You're at home in bed, literally, and like they seem to, like Kerry, continuously seem to unearth these great forwards with James O'Donoghue, Colm Cooper, and David Difford now, and then you'd Kilkenny with DJ Carey, you'd Henry Shefflin, TJ Reid, and now you have a certain Billy Drennan.
Yeah.
Who would be very familiar to us from his exploits in last year's All Ireland Under-20 final. So look at it, like St. Kieran's College, Kilkenny is one of the great nurseries. They're winning the Croke Cup almost at will until Ardscoil Reach put the brakes on them last year, but they're back again this year. So, like the conveyor belt in Kilkenny is very, very strong, Jack.
Yeah, very, very strong, and I suppose they are building a squad to take on Limerick, because it's a squad game, and that's what you'll need. And conversely, then for Limerick, they're only 2 weeks out from championship. Do you give the 15 you plan on starting against Waterford a run out, or does he continue to kind of play, we'll say, 10 of your guaranteed starting championship team and kind of one in each line then that's on the periphery? We're obviously going to be without Will O'Donoghue, so that's one place definitely on offer. I suppose first and foremost, who will partner Dara Donovan in midfield?
Well, you must remember that Dara missed the semi-final.
Yeah.
So Willem O'Donoghue out, if you turn and have a player of the caliber of Dara O'Donovan coming back, it's a very, very strong position. And you must remember the players that did not feature in the league semi-final. You're talking about Kyle Hayes, you're talking about Dan Morrissey, Gearóid Hegarty, Seamus Flanagan, Richie English.
Yeah.
It's a bounty of riches, Jack. What John Kiley will do, I think we will probably see a fair resemblance to the team that's probably likely to start against Waterford. I agree with you on that.
Yeah.
Jack, don't ask me to name it, please.
No, I won't, because we're not in the business of doing that anymore, because John obviously gets it right more often than not. But it will be interesting, because it's unprecedented again to be so close to the championship. Like, I personally think it's good preparation, but then again, if you pick up an injury, you'll be wondering about it. But that Waterford game is so close. What I'd say to you is, would you rather be Limerick in a league final, or Waterford that probably have more time to prep, whereas Limerick, are guaranteed a good hard game to get ready for Munster?
I think it's an ideal situation. There is no substitute in preparation for a big game, and I'm referring now to the Waterford game. There is no substitute, Jack, from good, hard, competitive games to sharpen you up. And I think the games against Tipperary and Kilkenny will just have done that for Limerick. There is no doubt at all that in the second half against Tipperary, all the signs were there that Limerick have recaptured their mojo and are really, really getting back to near their best. The question is, is there a danger of peaking too soon? And, will they be able to sustain it over 4 grueling games in the Munster Championship? That is the big question. But we have seen in the past, the way that John Kiley, Paul Kennerk have managed the workload of their players and have managed these things. Like, they're the masters at it, Jack.
Oh, they definitely are. And before we go from the game, who's it more important to? Because obviously Kilkenny haven't won a national title since 2018, But if Limerick were to lose against probably their closest All Ireland rivals, it just gives Kilkenny that edge that if they were to meet again in Croke Park, that they had the most recent win. So it's not as straightforward as saying, "Oh, Limerick are winning All Irelands; they don't need to win a league." Like, it is a hugely vital game.
Huge vital game, but Jack, it is far more important, I think, for Kilkenny to put down a marker. Far greater for Kilkenny. We know what Limerick are about. Like Kilkenny, Jack, are to a certain degree are a team in a certain amount of transition. You know, and they really need to put down a marker. And I suppose from a Derek Ling point of view, following the departure of Brian Cody, it will be, you know, put down a marker that it's business as usual in Kilkenny.
Yeah, of course it is. It is interesting, but I still think it's very important for Limerick just to keep the foot down while they're going so well. But it remains to be seen. But if you were to call it,
I'm calling Limerick, Jack.
and kind of do you think it'll be as close as the All Ireland, or probably something a bit closer
because
to
the All Ireland final was not as close as the final scoreline suggested. And I've said that to you a number of times. We coughed up a number of Hail Mary points towards the end. I think Limerick by 4 or 5, Jack.
Yeah, I don't know. Do I agree that the All Ireland final wasn't that close? My heart certainly would disagree with you. But I do. There was a lot of scores in the end from Kilkenny, but I don't think Limerick are really home and home until probably the 71st, 72nd minute. But I do see a big performance in Limerick this weekend. I think they'll win, and I think they could win by the same margin that they beat Tipperary. And again, there was kind of scores down the end from Tip. The game was over probably with 10-15 to play. But that's the National League final this Sunday, the 9th of April, 2 o'clock in Pairc Ui Chaoimh. It's certainly one to look forward to.